Well, all right. Let's say we dive in with another reading from Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. That's right. But first, we got to set the mood with killing the lights, getting that fire crackling, and the D harp a buzzing. That's right. All right. Hey, we got us a long one in store ahead of us, Dale. So you may want to go get you a nice taste of bourbon or some other kind of drink, maybe a snack bar, some raisins, though I don't partake myself in the raisins, that is. Sin against humanity, I like to say. And anyhow, what are we reading tonight? Well, the table, the ass, and the stick. All right. Let's dive in. As we usually do. There was once a tailor who had 3 sons and 1 goat. And the goat, as she nourished them all with her milk, was obliged to have good food. And so she was led every day down to the willows by the water side rather. And this business the sons didn't turn. And one day the eldest took the goat to the churchyard where the best sprouts are, and that she might eat her fill and gambol about. In the evening, when it was time to go home, he says, "Well, goat, have you had enough?" And the goat answered, "I am so full I cannot pull another blade of grass. Bah, bah." "Then come home," said the youth, and fastened a string to her, led her to her stall, and fastened her up. "Now," said the old tailor, "has the goat had her proper food?" "Oh," answered the son, "she is so full she can pull no more." But the father, wishing to see for himself, went out to the stall and stroked his dear goat, and said, "My dear goat, are you full?" And the goat answered, "How can I be full? There was nothing to pull, though I looked all about me, bah, bah." "What's this I hear?" cried the tailor, and he ran and called out to the youth. "Oh, you liar! You say that the goat was full, and she has been hungry all the time." And in his wrath he took up a yard measure and drove his son out the house with many blows. The next day came in turn of the second son, and he found a fine place in the garden hedge, where there were good green sprouts, and the goat ate them all up. And in the evening, when he came to lead her home, he says, "Well, goat, have you had enough?" And the goat answered, "I am so full I cannot pull another blade of grass, bah, bah." "Then come home," said the youth, and led her home and tied her up. "Now," said the old tailor, "has the goat had her proper food?" "Oh," answered the son, "she is so full she can no more can pull." The tailor, not satisfied, went out to the stall and said, "My dear goat, are you really full?" And the goat answered, "How can I be full? There was nothing to pull, though I looked all about me, bah, bah." "Well, that good for nothing rascal," cried the tailor, "to let the dear creature go fasting." And running back, he chased the youth with his yard wand out of the house. Then came the turn of the third son, who, meaning to make all sure, found some shrubs with the finest sprouts possible, and left the goat to devour them. And in the evening, when he came home to lead her home, he says, "Well, goat, are you full?" And the goat answered, "I am so full I cannot pull another blade of grass, bah, bah." "Then come home," said the youth, and he took her to her stall and fastened her up. "Now," said the old tailor, "has the goat had her proper food?" "Oh," answered the son, "she is so full she can no more pull." But the tailor, not trusting his word, went to the goat and says, "My dear goat, are you really full?" The malicious animal answered, "How can I be full? There was nothing to pull, though I looked all about me, ba ba." "Oh, the wretches!" cried the tailor, "the one as good for nothing and careless as the other. I will no longer have such fools about me." And rushing back, in his wrath he laid about him with his yard wand, and belabored his son's back so unmercifully that he ran away out of the house. So the old tailor was left alone with the goat. The next day he went out to the stall and let out the goat, saying, "Come, my dear creature, I will take you myself to the willows." So he led her by a string and brought her to the green hedges and pastures, where there was plenty of food for her to taste. And saying to her, "Now for once you can eat to your heart's content." And he left her there till evening. And then he returned and says, "Well, goat, are you full?" And she answered, "I am so full I cannot pull another grade of grass." Ha, ba, ba. "Then come home," said the tailor, and leading her to her stall, he fastened her up. And before he left her, he turned once more, saying, "Now then, for once you are full." But the goat actually cried, "How can I be full? There was nothing to pull, though I looked all about me, ba, ba." When the tailor heard that, he marveled, and saw at once that his 3 sons had been sent away without reason. "Wait a minute," cried he, "you ungrateful creature. It's not enough merrily to drive you away. I will teach you to show your face again among honorable tailors." So in haste he went and fetched his razor and seized the goat, and he shaved her mouth as smooth as the palm of his hand. And as the odd measure was too honorable a weapon, he took the whip and fetched her such a crack that with many a jump and spring she ran away. The tailor felt very sad as he sat alone in his house, and would willingly have had his sons back again, but no one knew where they had gone. The eldest son, when he was driven from the home, apprenticed himself to a joiner, and he applied himself diligently to his trade. And when the time came for him to travel, his master gave him a little table, nothing much to look at, made of common wood, but it had one great quality. And when anyone set it down and said, "Table be covered," all at once the good little table had a clean cloth on it, and a plate, and a knife, and a fork and dishes with roast and boiled meat, and a large glass of red wine sparkling so as to cheer the heart. The young apprentice thought that he was set for life, and he went merrily out into the world, and never cared whether an inn were good or bad, or whether he could get anything to eat there or not. When he was hungry, it did not matter where he was, whether in the fields, in the woods, or in a meadow. He set down his table and said, "Be covered," and there he was provided with everything his heart could wish. And at last it occurred to him that he would go back to his father, whose wrath might by this time have subsided, and perhaps because of this wonderful table he might receive him again gladly. And it happened that one evening during his journey home he came to an inn that was quite full of guests, who bade him welcome, and asked him to sit down with them to eat, as otherwise he would have found some difficulty in getting anything. "No," answered the young joiner, "I could not think of depriving you. You had much better be my guests." Then they laughed and thought he must be joking, but he brought out his little table, and he put it in the middle of the room and said, "Table be covered," and immediately it was set out with food much better than the landlord had been able to provide, and a good smell of it greeted the noses of the guests very agreeably. "Fall to, good friends," said the joiner, and the guests, when they saw how it was, needed no second asking, but taking up knife and fork, fell to valiantly. And what seemed most wonderful was that when a dish was empty, immediately a full one was stood in its place, and all the while the landlord stood in the corner and watched all that went on. And he could not tell what to say about it, but he thought such cooking as that would make my inn prosper. The joiner and his fellowship kept it up very merrily until late at night, and at last they went to sleep, and the young joiner, going to bed, left his wishing table standing against the wall. The landlord, however, could not sleep for thinking of the table, and he remembered that there was in his lumber room an old table very much like it. So he fetched it, and taking away the joiner's table, he left the other in its place. The next morning the joiner paid his reckoning and took up the table, not dreaming that it was carried off the wrong one, and went on his way. About noon he reached home, and his father received him with great joy. "Now, my dear son, what have you learned?" said he to him. "I have learned to be a joiner, father," he answered. "That is a good trade," returned the father, "but what have you brought back with you from your travels?" "Oh, the best thing I've got, father, is this little table," said he. The tailor looked at it on all sides and said, "You have certainly produced no masterpiece. It is a rubbish old table." "But it is a very wonderful one," answered the son. "When I set it down and tell it to be covered, at once the finest meats are standing on it, and wine so good that it cheers the heart. Let us invite all the friends and neighbors, that they may feast and enjoy themselves, for the table will provide enough for all." And when the company was all assembled, he put his table in the middle of the room and commanded it, "Table be covered." But the table never stirred, and remained just as empty as any other table that does not understand talking. And when the poor joiner saw that the table remained unfurnished, he felt ashamed to stand there like a fool. The company laughed at him freely, and were obliged to return unfilled and uncheered to their houses. The father gathered his pieces together and returned to his tailoring, and the son went to work under another master. The second son had bound himself apprentice to a miller, and when time was up, his master said to him, "As you have behaved yourself so well, I will give you an ass of a remarkable kind. He will draw no cart and carry no sack." "What is good of him, then?" asked the young apprentice. "He spews forth gold," answered the miller. "If you put a cloth before him and say, 'Brickle Brett,' out comes gold pieces front and back." "Well, that is a capital thing," said the apprentice, and thanking his master went out into the world. Whenever he wanted gold, all he had to say was "Brickle Brett" to the ass, and there was a shower of gold pieces. And so he had no cares as he traveled about. Whenever he came, he lived on the best, and dearer the better, as his purse was always full. And when he had been looking about him in the world a long time, he thought he would go and find out of his father, who would perhaps forget his anger and receive him kindly, because of his gold ass. And it happened that he came to a lodge in the same inn where his brother's table had been exchanged. And he was leading his ass in hand, and the landlord was for taking the ass from him to tie it up. But the young apprentice said, "Don't trouble yourself, old fella. I will take him to the stable myself and tie him up, and then I shall know where to find him." The landlord thought this was very strange, and he never supposed that a man who was accustomed to look after his ass himself could have much to spend. But when the stranger, feeling in his pocket, took out 2 gold pieces and told him to get him something good for supper, the landlord stared and ran and fetched the best that he had got. After supper, the guests called the reckoning, and the landlord, wanting to get all the profit he could, said that it would be the amount of 2 gold pieces more. The apprentice felt in his pocket, but his gold had come to an end. "Oh, wait a moment, landlord," said he. "I will go and fetch some money." And he went out to the room, carrying the tablecloth with him, and the landlord could not tell what to make of it, and, curious to the knowing his proceedings, slipped after him. And as the guest shut the stable door, he peeped in through a knot-hole. Then he saw how the stranger spread the cloth before the ass, and saying "Brickle Brett," and directly the ass let fall gold pieces from back and front, so that it rained down money upon the ground. "Dear me," said the landlord, "that is an easy way of getting ducats. A purse of money like that is no bad thing." After that, the guest paid his reckoning and went to bed, but the landlord slipped down to the stable in the middle of the night, led the gold ass away, and tied up another ass in its place. The next morning the apprentice set forth with his ass, never doubting that it was the right one. By noon he came to his father's house, who was so rejoiced to see him again, and received him gladly. "What trade have you taken up, my son?" asked the father. "I am a miller, dear father," answered he. "What have you brought home from your travels?" continued the father. "Nothing but an ass," answered the son. "We have plenty of asses here," said the father. "You had much better have brought me a nice goat." "Yes," answered the son, "but this is no common ass, and when I say brickle bread, the good creature spits out a whole cloth full of gold pieces. Let me call all the neighbors together. I will make rich people of them all." "Well, that'll be fine," said the tailor. I need labor no more at my needle." And then he rushed out himself, called the neighbors together, and as soon as they were all assembled, the miller called out to them to make room, and brought in the ass, and spread his cloth before him. "Now pay attention," said he, and cried, "Brickle bread." But no gold pieces came, and that showed that the animal was no more scientific than any other ass. So the poor miller made a long face when he saw that he had been taken in, and begged pardon of the neighbors, who all went home as poor as they had come. And there was nothing for it but that the old man must take to his needle again, and that the young one should take the service with a miller. The third brother had bound himself apprentice to a turner, and as turning is a very ingenious handicraft, it took him a long time to learn it. And his brothers told him in a letter how badly things had gone with them, and how on the last night of their travels the landlord deprived them of their treasures. When the young turner had learned his trade, he was ready to travel. His master, to reward him for his good conduct, gave him a sack, and told him that there was a stick inside it. "Well, I can hang up a sack, and it may be very useful to me," said the young man, "but what good of it is the stick?" "Well, I will tell you," answered the master. "If anyone does you any harm, and you say, 'Stick out of my sack,' the stick will jump out upon them, and will belabor them so soundly that they shall not be able to move or leave the place for a week. And it will not stop until you say, 'Stick into the sack.'" The apprentice thanked him and took up the sack and started on his travels. And when anyone attacked him, he would say, "Stick out of the sack." And directly out jumped the stick and dealt with a shower of blows on coat or jerkin, and the back beneath, which quickly ended the affair. One evening the young turner reached the inn where his two brothers had been taken in. He laid his knapsack on the table and began to describe all the wonderful things he had seen in the world. "Yes," said he, "you may talk of your self-spreading table, gold supply, and ass, and so forth, very good things, I do not deny, but they are nothing in comparison with the treasure that I have acquired and carry with me in that sack." The landlord opened his ears. "What in the world can it be?" thought he. "Very likely the sack is full of precious stones, and I have the perfect right to it, for all the good things come in threes." When bedtime came, the guest stretched himself on a bench and put his sack under his head for a pillow. And the landlord, when he thought the young man was sound asleep, came and, stooping down, pulled gently at the sack, so as to remove it cautiously, and put another in its place. The turner had only been waiting for this to happen, and just as the landlord was giving a last courageous pull, he cried, "Stick out of the sack!" And out flew the stick directly, and laid to hardly on the landlord's back, and in vain he begged for mercy. The louder he cried, the harder the stick beat time on his back until he fell exhausted to the ground. And then the turner said, "If you do not give me the table and the ass directly, the game shall begin all over again." "Oh dear, no," cried the landlord, quite collapsed. "I will gladly give it all back if you only make this terrible goblin go back into the sack." "Then," said the young man, "I will be generous instead of just. But beware," he said, "stick into the sack," and left him in peace. The next morning the turner set out with the table and the ass on his way home to his father, and the tailor was very glad indeed to see him again, and asked him what he had learned abroad. "My dear father," answered he, "I have become a turner." "A very ingenious handicraft," said the father, "and what have you brought with you from your travels?" "A very valuable thing, dear father," answered the son, "a stick in a sack." "What?" cried the father. "A stick? That thing's not worth so much trouble when you can cut one from any tree." "But it's not a common stick, dear father," said the young man. "When I say stick out of the bag, it outjumps a stick upon anyone who means to harm me, and makes him dance again, and does not leave off till he is beaten to the earth, and asks pardon. Just look here with this stick. I have recovered the table and the ass which the thieving landlord had taken from my two brothers. Now let them both be sent for, and bid all the neighbors too, and they shall eat and drink to their hearts' content, and I will fill their pockets with gold." The old tailor could not quite believe in such a thing, but he called his sons and all the neighbors together. Then the turner brought in the ass, opened the cloth before him, and said to his brother, "Now, my dear brother, speak to him." And the miller said, "Bricklebrit," and immediately the cloth was covered with gold pieces until they had all got more than they could carry away. I tell you this because it is a pity you were not there. And then then the turner set down the table, and he says, "Now, my dear brother, speak to it." And the joiner said, "Table be covered." And directly it was covered and set forth plentiful to the richest dishes. And then they held a feast such as had never been taken place in the tailor's house before, and the whole company remained through the night merrily and content. The tailor after that locked up the cupboard, his needle and thread, and his yard measure and goose, and lived ever after with his 3 sons in great joy and splendor. But what became of the gold? Oh, the unlucky cause of the tailor's sons being driven out? I tell you, she felt so ashamed of her bald head that she ran into a fox's hole and hid herself. And when the fox came home, he caught sight of 2 great eyes staring him out of the darkness, and was frightened and ran away. A bear met him, and seeing that he looked very disturbed, asked him, "What is the matter, brother fox, that you should look like that?" "Oh dear," answered the fox, "a grizzly beast is sitting in my hole, and he stared at me with fiery eyes." "We shall soon drive him out," said the bear, and went to the hole and looked in. But when he caught sight of the fiery eyes, he likewise felt great terror seize him, and not wishing to have anything to do with so grisly a beast, he made off. He was soon met by a bee, who remarked that he had not a very courageous air, and said to him, "Bear, you have a very depressed countenance. What has become of your high spirit?" "Well, you may well ask," answered the bear. "In the fox's hole there sits a grisly beast with fiery eyes, and we cannot drive him out." The bee answered, "I know you despise me, bear. I am a poor feeble little creature, but I think I can help you." So she flew into the fox's hole, and sitting on the goat's smooth shaved head, stung her so severely that she jumped up crying, "Bah, bah," and ran out like mad into the world, and to this hour no one knows where she ran to. And that has been the table, the ass, and the stick. From Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. I told you it's gonna be a long one, but I thought it was pretty good. What'd you think? Let me know down in the comments there. Well, let's get to the harp here. All right. So I will leave you with that one. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I got an affiliate link for your Grimm's Fairy Tales down in the description, as I always tell you. So if you want to support the channel and get yourself a book, head on down and do it. In any event, other than that, I want to say kisses to the missus and a tip of the hat to your old cat. You come on back again, you understand? You hear me? I hope you do. All right. Take care of yourself now.